Ensemble continues its New Year's tradition of having a living American composer curate a concert designed to uplift and inspire, having as a reference the universal hymn Amazing Grace, which actually is a hymn that transcends cultures and nationalities. In the past, as you remember, many of you that have attended these beautiful programs, we had composers Adolphus Hellstork and Jeffrey Mumford in this role. And for this edition, we are honored to count on Jerod Tate as our composer and guest curator. Welcome, Jerod. It's great to have you with us.
Hi, Impichchaachaaha Tate. Chikasha nompa okno so holshifo Jerod Impichchaachaaha Tate. Chikasha saya, Chikasha inki saya. Impichchaachaaha chokat michashawi iksai shaun shaloli li, talo ikbi li. Ashlaka sayopa, chukmashki, yakoke. Hello, everyone. My name is Jerod Impichchaachaaha Tate. I am a citizen of the Chickasaw Nation here in Oklahoma, and I'm a professional classical composer. And I just am pinching myself. I can't believe I'm in this role. I'm very, very honored to be doing this. And I cannot wait to talk to y'all and Kirsten, our guest soprano, who hails from the Muskogee Nation from Oklahoma. And so it's a really, really cool program. Very excited about it.
Thank you, Jerod. As you said, the wonderful soprano Kirsten Kunkle is our soloist for the performance, and we are very happy to have her being part of this conversation. Kirsten, welcome. It's great to have you with us.
Medo hische, estongon joka edegaga, Dr. Kirsten C. Kunkle Joho Jeff Kados, Hodogolgi, Muskogee Toes. Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Kirsten C. Kunkle. I am from the Muskogee Nation. I am from the Wind Clan. As Jerod mentioned, my tribe also is based predominantly in Oklahoma. I am based predominantly in Ohio. So I am also part of this wonderful winter storm we're all having, but it's been a wonderful, lovely snow day. I'm delighted to be here, and I'm delighted to once again be working with my dear friend and colleague, Jerod Tate.
Fantastic. So, I mean, both of you have an incredible career, incredible bios. So instead of me reading all your incredible accomplishments, I would like to start asking you both, why music? Why music? How was that process to become professional musicians? And give us highlights of that path, that career. All right. Let's start with Jerod. Please, Jerod.
Sure, that's fine. Well, let's see here. Okay, so I mean, it all begins with my parents. So my father, Charles, is Chickasaw from Oklahoma, born and raised here. Dad is born and raised in Ardmore, Oklahoma, where he lives now. And Dad went to school and got his Juris Doctor degree from the University of Oklahoma. And so my father professionally was a tribal judge and a tribal attorney, special district judge. And very importantly, my father is author to our current Chickasaw Constitution. For those of you who are not aware, all of our 574 tribes in the United States, we all have individual constitutions and that run in tandem with the U.S. Constitution. So we are dual citizens. So I'm a citizen of the Chickasaw Nation and of the United States. And so my dad is author to that Constitution. He's a very important historic figure in our tribe. And, you know, my dad, just being raised by him, I was raised with a very unusually beautiful and robust knowledge of Indian country in general, culturally, politically, and just all kinds of historic aspects. I just know a lot of tribal history and stuff. And so I was given a lot of knowledge from my father. And, but also my dad is a phenomenally trained classical pianist and baritone. So I grew up with my father singing and playing classical repertoire in the house all the time. And now, real quick, just my mother, Patricia, was Manx Irish, so I am Manx in Chickasaw, and my mother was a professional choreographer and dancer. So between my two parents, I grew up saturated in theater, dance, and opera and ballet, and in particular, American theater and dance and opera and ballet. And so, like, a lot of my early heroes were choreographers like Isadora Duncan and Martha Graham and Ruth St. Dennis. Ted Shawn and Agnes DeMille. Then later on, like Bob Fosse and Alvin Ailey and Jerome Robbins. I mean, this was all part of my canon. And along with that came a lot of modern music as well. So I was just, between my two parents, I was just really saturated in the American arts, but also grew up with a great knowledge of American Indian authors and painters and choreographers, playwrights, and that kind of thing. So I was just really, really saturated with a lot of things. And my dad was the one that started me on the piano. And I started late. I was like 8 years old when I wanted to start picking it up. And then I told him I wanted to take lessons. And 3 months into my piano lessons, I had announced to my family that I was to be a concert pianist. So I was in. But anyway, that was the origins of music, and I was just personally attracted to it from the get-go, and I had a lot of advantage. My parents were just really unusually trained in all kinds of different ways, and so anyway, and I'll loop back to some of that. But that's my basic influence and background. Oh, yeah. And why? I mean, why does, that's really funny. It's like, our passions have no reason whatsoever. That's the irrational impulses that we have in our lives that we all want and need. And then what we do is the task of how is to do that, and to do that with great intelligence. And so, but I mean, it's you can never tell why we do. It's like, if I'm really passionate about, dentistry, and I've got like I go to conferences that, in Las Vegas about new dental polymers, and I'm really passionate and geeky about that, it's going to happen. It was like, so we all have passions that are really parallel to artists. It's no different. It just happens to be what we happen to irrationally be attracted to. So I just happen to love music.
Wonderful. Kirsten, tell us.
It continues to surprise me how similar Jerod and I are. This happens frequently where he'll bring something up and it's pretty much exactly the same thing that I would say. And I'll tell you why. Because my mother was a ballerina, just like Jerod's mother. She studied dance. She was a ballerina. She got her undergraduate degree from Butler University in Indianapolis in dance. Unfortunately, she broke her leg right before her senior year. She did not have any interest in becoming a modern dancer, so she changed career paths completely and ended up going into psychology along with my father. So I was raised by two psychologists, Kunkle and Kunkle, consulting psychologists out of Fremont, Ohio. People often ask me if they would, look at me as a case study, and I'm pretty sure they left their work at their job. I think they were done with it at the end of the day. But it was an interesting experience being raised by someone who was so utterly devoted to the arts. She had grown up being an avocational pianist. Her father had played ragtime for fun. He was also an aeronautics engineer. And he's my Muskogee line. My mother's line is the Muskogee line. And I grew up saturated in music, absolutely saturated in music, theater, dance. I started ballet classes when I was 2 years old. I started theater when I was about 9. I think I started voice lessons at 12. I was in my first opera when I was 13. I was in Tosca in the adult chorus. I was very proud of that, not in the children's chorus when I was 13. And my mother was so excited that I had a passion for singing. She was not a singer. She, at some point, she asked me to give her a voice lesson, and it was a little rough. But she got me into piano very young, and I played clarinet and violin growing up for a while, and I also studied voice and found that voice was really my instrument. So there was never really a question of whether or not I would be a musician. It was just how much of my life would be dedicated to music. I also loved writing and theater and visual arts. And I found that my best talents, if you will, my best skills lie in singing and writing. And because of Jerod, I've discovered this little talent of mine that I've started composing quite a bit and gotten quite a few commissions, and I've really grown to love it. So it's become something that has become a part of me that I never anticipated. So at the core of it, it's because of my mother. And I can't think of a better reason to become a musician than to follow the loves and passions of your parents if they fit yours as well. And why? I think it's the same thing. I fell in love with music. I fell in love with the spectacle of opera. I saw Faust when I was, I believe, 12 years old. And then later I was able to play the role of Marguerite. And I was absolutely delighted by it, that I had that opportunity. And it just all came full circle. So I remember, one last thought on this. I remember when I was in college, there was a group called something about, college ambassadors or something like that for the School of Music. And we were all interviewed our freshman year. And they said, what is your ultimate goal in your musical career? And I didn't really have to hesitate or think about it. My ultimate goal, which I don't think Jerod has ever heard this, was to be to opera what Maria Tallchief was to dance. And that was what I always wanted. And that's what I still aspire to be. Now, that's a very lofty goal. But I feel like my experiences have been worthwhile and noteworthy. And as you said, we're just starting. So I'm very excited about that. And that is the who and where and why of my beginnings.
Fantastic, Kirsten. So let's talk a little bit about let's go now into the program that we're going to present on January. I mean, for our audience, you cannot imagine how much fun it has been, how rewarding it has been to work with Jerod in this program. I want, Jerod, to thank you for your amazing proposals, for your patience, because, some of the pieces were written for a rather large symphony orchestra, and he has created extraordinary productions for our group, which actually I think, Jerod, brings some more intimacy to some of the pieces, I have to say. I hope you are happy with that too. So 4 of the 6 works of the program is your music, and I would like that you tell us why those pieces. I mean, among your huge repertoire, why did you pick the music that you picked for us?
Yeah, I was just typing up an answer to that very question for I believe is it PBS, I guess, is covering this a little bit. We got some coverage. And I mean, basically I wanted to find something that showed kind of the diversity of what I'm able to do in my life passion. And so my life passion in composing is to literally develop American Indian classical and symphonic composition. And so in doing so, there's a lot to be done. And so, there's different, there's just, in the arts, there's just different treatments. Now, this is, again, a great advantage that I had growing up in theater, because theater shows you all the diversity of the musical arts and the performing arts about what we can do. And everybody's going to get this. So, I mean, like, for instance, on the work that we have called Spider Brings Fire, it's for narration and orchestra. Well, I mean, of course, everybody knows about Peter and the Wolf, and that's in you. So when you have an actor on stage, or Soldier's Tale, or something like that, Young People's Guide to the Orchestra, that type of thing. And so that's historically been done, I mean, for hundreds of years. And so that's part of the theatric performing arts. And so I picked a fire origin story called Spider Brings Fire, and I will be able to tell that story with the orchestra. So, I mean, that's just a blast. And that's a story for all ages. So it's a very inclusive thing. And it's also, all ancient cultures have origin stories like fire or the sun or the moon or people, animals, all kinds of things like that. And so that's something that everybody can relate to. And so that was one story. And so that's an example. But then also I do compose works that are in other tribal languages. And so we're able to, and tribal subjects. So Standing Bear, what I call Standing Bear, a Ponca Indian cantata, is about the Ponca leader Standing Bear, who was a leader during their removal from the Nebraska area into northern Oklahoma. So, and it was a very, very intense story, as you can imagine. So we're telling some of the story of Standing Bear, and that can be sung in both English and in the Ponca language. So there's another tribal language. I just recently wrote a piece. Actually, right now I'm writing a piece in 6 different languages that Kirsten will be singing in the fall. So that will be in Chickasaw, Potawatomi, Ponca. I'm sorry, Cheyenne, Apache, Wichita, and Modoc. So there'll be different languages. So that's an example. So Standing Bear is one of those, and it's more intimate with a baritone soloist. And then, of course, we've got a hymn arrangement, which is a hymn. It comes from the book, the hymn book that Choctaws and Chickasaws sing from. And so this is another part of Indian country that not very many people are familiar with, and that is we have Indian church. And many tribes have a huge canon of native hymns for our church services that we sing in our languages that are in our style, and for Southeastern American Indians, which Kirsten and I belong to, our styles are a real hybrid of the Protestant style church hymns that came over, mixed in with our folk music and in our language. And so we will all be hearing that at the very beginning of the program, which is cool. And that, of course, is where, if you don't mind me giving away, but Kirsten's daughter and my son will be joining in singing. And so Kirsten will sing in Muskogee. We'll have some Choctaw and Chickasaw in mine. And so that's the kind of variation that we have in the program. So, and this is just scratching the surface. I am so blessed to be able to, I feel like a kid in a candy shop. There's so many things to explore and be done. And I mean, I could be doing this for 50 lifetimes, and all the combinations. Just recently, somebody asked me, like, how do you come up with so many ideas, or is it hard for you to come up with ideas? I'm like, oh my gosh, it's like are there projects that you like more than others? I'm like, no, because I get to come up with like great ideas. Every single project I have is a brand new idea or a really cool variation of something else or something. It's just goes on forever. How many ways we can do this and express ourselves artistically, especially about Indian country.
When I asked you which other two pieces could you add to the program that you feel relate to you or they have an impact in you, I couldn't believe that you choose my favorite piece by Samuel Barber that I have been trying to present with PostClassical Ensemble for years. And then you said, yes, of course, Samuel Barber, Knoxville, summer of 1915. And then you mentioned Prokofiev Classical Symphony No. 1, and we picked the Larghetto, which is one of my favorite pieces of Prokofiev, and actually with such an incredible sense of humor that actually brings to the performance this component too. So I want Kirsten to tell us about her experience singing this piece. But Jerod, before that, why did you pick precisely these two pieces to join?
Great question. I really appreciate that question. Okay, well, first of all, I have a real affinity for our Russian composers because they're truly a great role model for me in expressing their ethnic identity in classical and symphonic music. And I mean, boy, did they. I mean, you can't be more Russian than the Russians. It's just impossible. And Prokofiev was known as the people's composer. In fact, he and Stalin died on the same day, and they postponed announcing Prokofiev's death because it would have shadowed Stalin's funeral services, because he was so beloved, and of course his contributions to everything. Prokofiev is a hero to me because he could write anything he wanted to. He had the ability to write any particular style or orchestration or concept, and he just wrote anything he needed to for any reason he wanted to at any time. He was so flexible in what he did. I mean, you got Peter and the Wolf, you've got the Romeo and Juliet ballet, which is all this romanticism, and then you've got these incredibly mechanical and rhythmically augment and pieces of his wartime piano sonatas, like as an example, or I mean, just unbelievably diverse what this guy did. And so I'm really inspired, and it was all expressions of his Russian identity, and I'm really inspired by that. There are many other composers as well, but Tchaikovsky is another one. The Russians really have had a great impact on world history. And then also in terms of American composers, I just adore Samuel Barber. And when I was in undergraduate school as a piano major, I was listening to all of this. I just saturated myself in all this symphonic and chamber music of all kinds of composers, but I explored a lot of American composers, like George Crumb was another really influential composer on me. But Sam Barber, he was so American, and he was really folk American to me. And I mean, like, his piano concerto is something I just love, but also, like, I know it because it was choreographed by Chu Sang-go, with the American Ballet Theater, and Baryshnikov Impichchaachaaha was the soloist for that. So I grew up with piano repertoire of Sam Barber, his piano concerto with John Browning playing, because it was a ballet, so that's how I got to know that. So you see, like, I have a lot of, that's where I mean, it's like about the American theater part that I grew up with. Sam Barber just really fits that bill. I did a lecture on his piano preludes when I was an undergraduate because they were just so remarkable, and his songs are incredible. But yeah, Knoxville, summer of 1915, when I first heard that as an undergraduate piano major, I was just absolutely knocked over with nostalgia, and I did. It really, really spoke to me. And so here's my friend Kirsten. And I'm like, you gotta sing this. I just assumed she knew it, blah blah blah. And so fortunately, this is her debut with this, and so I'm really pleased that we're giving her an opportunity to add it. I mean, it's really neat to be able to facilitate opportunities for my colleagues like that. So, just those two composers just really spoke to me.
Fantastic. So, as I said, this is one of probably my favorite Samuel Barber piece. The poem is incredible. It's so American, isn't it, Kirsten? I mean, how can you find anything more American than, I mean, in the voice of a child, talking about this recollection of a summer. And I just wanted to mention that the poem is by James Agee, who was a novelist and a journalist. He's known by probably his most better known novelist, A Death in the Family, but he was a scriptwriter, and he actually participated as a scriptwriter in films like The African Queen and The Night of the Hunter. But anyway, Kirsten, tell us about you singing this. Have you sang this piece before, and how do you feel this piece into your singing?
So no, I have not sung this piece before, although I have.
I've never conducted it either. So
that's good. We'll be doing this together and figuring it out together. I have loved this piece since I was in graduate school at University of Michigan. I didn't touch it then. I just listened a lot. I went to a lot of performances of it. It's a very popular piece, so people sing it a lot for concerto competitions and things like that. And so I got to hear it quite a bit with lots of different interpretations. And it's always been on my list. It's always been one of those bucket list pieces, that I always hoped I would get to sing. And for a while, I was on a faculty down in Georgia, and one of the composition faculty members had a local symphony orchestra, and he was going to plan to have me sing it. And then the next year, contracts changed. I moved away, and I didn't come back to do it. It wasn't planned. It wasn't slated. And so I was very sad about that. But that was 10, 12 years ago now, maybe even longer. And coming to it now, Jerod sent me a text when you were first discussing this and said, how would you like to sing, Knoxville at the Kennedy Center? And I just dropped my jaw, and then I picked it up, and he expected me to text him back, I think. And I just called him and I said, did you really just ask me if I could be available to do this? Because I'm going to drop everything to make sure that this works. And he says, well, I don't know what your schedule is. And so anyway, I love this piece. I love Samuel Barber. I think he's a brilliant, brilliant composer. I've sung A Hand of Bridge before, and the more I got into the minutia, I would discover something new and incredibly brilliant every time looking at that score. And I've been working with Knoxville for months and months, and I still discover something new almost every time I sing it. And it's very difficult. It's a difficult piece. The key to it is to make it sound like it isn't. It is supposed to sound effortless and nostalgic and just really simply beautiful, which is the goal. But it is very difficult and very tricky. And I'm both looking forward to it completely and also mildly terrified. But I am so excited about it in the best of ways, because I know it is just one of those classic American pieces that just should be heard by absolutely everyone. I love Barber. I love Menotti. I love all of those people that composed around that time. And I just find that they truly are the essence of what American composition was in their heyday. And I hope that it stays a staple of the canon. I'm so excited to finally get to sing it. And I want to thank you for for letting me have that opportunity. And thank you, Jerod, for thinking of me and giving me that chance too. So I'm very, very excited about this piece. And my daughter has told me, just for the record, she's 5, by the way. She just turned 5. She has told me that Jerod's hymn is her new favorite piece. She dances to it every time I practice it. And then today she told me that Knoxville is one of her other favorite pieces. So, you know, we're doing really well with this concert with my 5-year-old.
This is fantastic, Kirsten. It's going to be phenomenal. Jerod, in 2022, you were a distinguished alumni award recipient from the Cleveland Institute of Music. And in 2021, you were appointed a cultural ambassador for the U.S. Department of State. Mm-hmm. And at this concert, we are honored that you are going to be presented with PostClassical Ensemble American Roots Artist Award for outstanding contributions to American music. So I want to already thank you for your work as a composer in the United States. And I ask everybody an applause to our wonderful composer already from here.
Thank you.
Wonderful. All right. So we have before we open to questions, I have some more questions for you. But before I do that, Kirsten and Jerod, anything else you want to mention to our audience about this program or about your career in general?
I think that it will be of interest to people that Jerod and I have known each other kind of off and on for a very long time. We met in Washington, D.C. We met at the National Museum of the American Indian at the Smithsonian. At the time, and I don't know if it still exists, there was a list of classical native artists and musicians through the NMAI. And Jerod was part of a panel and performances. And my dissertation, which was commissioned works that I premiered based on the poetry of my ancestor, Alexander Posey, who was poet laureate of my tribe, Muskogee Nation, for many years, and truly was probably the most famous Muskogee poet and writer until Joy Harjo. I had acquired my dissertation compositions and my recording. So they had invited me to come, and that's where I first met Jerod. And I don't even know how many years ago that was now, but it was probably 15 to 20 years now. It's at this point. Maybe
it was in 2007.
Okay, so yeah, okay. And we didn't actually get to work together until, what was that, 2021, Jerod and Bozeman? Yeah,
correct.
And at that point, Jerod and I each got to play one of our own compositions together. And that was so special to me. I literally had one composition to my name at that point, and we did it. And it was one from that Posey project. And then I sang one of Jerod's pieces as well. And we had this wonderful cellist, Julia Slovarp, who also played double bass on my piece. And so we got to collaborate then. And from there, we've just had these wonderful opportunities. We just premiered his opera, Shell Shaker, the first opera in a native language, Native American language, in Chickasaw, of course, in Oklahoma City. And I was part of that. And we've got wonderful projects coming up as well. And this is just one of many fantastic things we've gotten to do together. And that has been extremely special to me because I never anticipated having a very close friend and colleague, let alone a community of other Native American classical musicians. So it's been very exciting for me and something I never really anticipated because I never had that growing up. So I just thought that might be of interest to the people watching.
Those are really good points. You know, we are currently in an explosion, literally, of native classical performers and composers. In fact, Kirsten, who is our colleague that you are now reading her opera right now? She's about to develop one with Rihanna Yazzie as the librettist. And so what's Danielle's? Tell them about Danielle's project.
Jugalski. So it's a large choral work for soloists. So it's soloists doing choral music with primarily marimba, but other percussion as the accompaniment. And it's with Voices of Ascension. We'll do the premiere for that in April, right before we do the American Indian Symphony with Oklahoma City Philharmonic. So that is coming up very, very soon. So a lot of these wonderful opportunities, I mean, Jerod is very humble when I say, you know, he's the reason behind it. But I think because we have been working together and our names have been associated, and we always recommend one another as well, which is really lovely. I've had some amazing opportunities that I would not have had otherwise ever since Intermountain Opera Bozeman, which is now Opera Montana, got us all together during the pandemic. And it was a wonderful experience, and it's just grown from there. And through that, I got my first commission ever, and that was to write a piece for the 150th anniversary of Yellowstone, which I did and premiered there. And that just got the ball rolling for more people to commission me, which has been really exciting. And I can't say thank you enough to Jerod and my other colleagues who have just embraced me as another one of the cogs in the wheel of these native classical composers. I'm very excited to be part of that.
This is wonderful. This is actually the way I wanted to finish our conversation, which is to know from both of you the projects that you are involved now. I know that Jerod is not sleeping at all because he is writing music on his sleep. So tell us, Jerod, what is coming next very, very soon for you? Yes.
Go, Kirsten, go.
Oh, for me or for, okay. The next things on my list, I run an opera company out of Wilmington, Delaware. If anyone listening is within driving distance, which I know you are, but I know it's kind of far. We do 2 productions a year. So we're doing a French season this year. We're doing a French cabaret, and we're also doing Tales of Hoffman in September. I'm doing my first Tosca this year in California. So I'm very excited about that. That's been a dream since I was 13 years old, singing in the adult chorus. I'm doing so many things. I've got so much on my plate. I've got 3 works that I recently wrote that are going to be part of an album for mezzo out of Los Angeles. It's on chronic illness, and my pieces specifically are on miscarriage, loss of parent, and birth of child. So topics that are not often talked about and probably need to be more visible and apparent in the art form that we have, but also in the world. And so I've just got a lot of things I've been doing, and I've got my first Beethoven 9 coming up. I'm very excited about that. And just more of the same. I'm singing a lot, and I am composing, and I'm working on formulating an idea for how to get together a new libretto. So, you know, I've done a lot of wonderful things, and I'm continuing to do what I love. So, yeah, that's the gist.
So, Jerod, what's next for you?
I'm currently composing my American Indian Symphony, and this is the one that's sung in 6 different languages. Kirsten is on that, and also our baritone is Mark Billy, who is Choctaw from Oklahoma. And so that will premiere in April. And then, I've got a work for A Roomful of Teeth that's funded by Barlow. I've got a quartet for Ethel Quartet. I'm going into session here the day after tomorrow in Philadelphia to record my 2 quartets with a Dover string quartet. And then we will go to Chicago to have those played in Chicago as well. So I got a recording session. Then I've got to work to compose immediately for North Carolina Symphony that Grant Youngblood, our Lumbee baritone, will be singing in the Lumbee language. So that'll be a song cycle, about a 25-minute piece for a song cycle for him. And then I'm composing a violin concerto for Irina Murasano, who is a faculty at University of Maryland. And she is a very well-known Washington violinist. And then I'm composing an orchestration for the New York Philharmonic as part of the 250th anniversary. 2026 is coming up. There's a lot of celebration going on for that, and so those are just a few. There's more. I'm forgetting, but it's a lot. So I'm the 2025 is packed. I'm not ahead of schedule. Not.
Wonderful. So I also wanted to mention that we are going to have as a wonderful collaborator the phenomenal Chilean-born baritone Javier Arrey, who is going to be part of both the hymn and the beautiful cantata by Jerod. So I think we should open the microphone to our audience, don't you think? So I don't know if, I mean, we can do, David, however you prefer to do that. Do we have already questions asked in writing, or we can just ask the audience to go ahead? Oh, I see a hand over there. Okay, I let Caroline and David moderate this because I'm a disaster with technology.
If a hand's up, please feel free to unmute and ask your question.
May I go ahead, David?
Please.
Yes, hello. I'm Mather Pfeifenberger, a longtime fan of PostClassical Ensemble. It's great to be a part of this chat today. I wanted to say first, I first got to know your music, Jerod, because of PCE when they performed 5 years ago. Your work for string orchestra, Shaka Maxim, am I saying it correctly? A marvelous piece, and I've tried to get to know your music better. I need to give a lot more time to it, but I've collected some CDs and so on. And I really feel that this area of Native American classical composition is one of the most vibrant in our culture right now. So I'm really glad that PCE is putting the spotlight on it.
Yeah,
My question is, and this may be a little diffuse, but I mean, you're so active in this area. How do you see your activity as a Chickasaw classical composer in the larger context of the history of the Chickasaw Nation, or even the Native American nation and Native Americans in North America, if you want to address that at all?
I appreciate that. I am part of a generation of American Indians who are literally living the dreams of our ancestors, and so I often tell people that my ancestors walked 800 miles in mud so that I could compose an opera about them. And that's where we are as Native artists, is that we're in a reflection time in which we are paying homage to our ancestors. And again, it's like we're fulfilling a dream. They worked very hard so that we could be alive. And like my son Hiloha he is a ballet dancer as well. He speaks our language. He's a traditional stickball player and he's a horn player. And I tell him that he is very aware of. We have a photo of Edmund Pickens, our leader at the time that brought us over from Mississippi in the 1830s, and he's in our living room, and he is very aware of him, and he's very aware of that. So we're just in that time. We're in that pocket, and so I am part of many Native people that are flooding all kinds of professions. It's not just in the arts; it's everywhere. And so I feel in great company with many other Native colleagues. And then also it's really cool because we're contributing repertoire for the world. So it's not an exclusive thing. It's like we're part of many artists historically that have contributed things. And so we get to do the same thing. And so to me, it's a real joy, it's a real opportunity and a real privilege. And I feel like I'm privileged to be in a time in which things are growing beautifully.
Thank you so much.
Any other hands over there, or any question in writing?
If I'll take this opportunity really quick. There was two things that Kirsten had brought up that I think are really important. She was talking about her ancestor being a poet laureate for the Muskogee Nation, and then she talked about Joy Harjo really quickly. Joy Harjo is also a Muskogee person from Oklahoma. She lives in Tulsa. She's a friend of mine, and I just can't believe that. But she is our third time poet laureate for the United States of America. She did three what do you call them? Appointments in a row, and so she is a very important current, like, living historic figure to us. And so that's Joy, and I've been privileged to set her poetry to music. So that's really, but that's who she was talking about when she mentioned Joy Harjo. So we have a Native hero in who's in literature. And then she was also talking about Maria Tallchief. Maria Tallchief was Osage from Oklahoma, and she was a professional ballerina, and she was married to George Balanchine. Was that ABT, American Ballet Theater? Is that what? Yeah, okay. Or is it New York City Ballet? I'm sorry, I'm forgetting.
I'm not sure that I
okay.
would have to look it up.
And so, Balanchine had his own Firebird that he choreographed, and they were really good friends with Stravinsky, by the way. And And so she was the Firebird, and so your people would not go see the production if she was not dancing the lead. There was no substitute for her, but she was literally designated as America's first prima ballerina, and so she is a real hero to lots of natives, and she was one of five famous American Indian ballerinas who were all professional international dancers. Yvonne Choteau she became a professional ballerina when she's 14. She was hired by Ballet Russe at the age of 14. I mean, so there's a whole thing. So she was just mentioning a couple artists that we talk about in passing, and some Americans aren't aware of those artists. I mean, they're great American and American Indian artists.
Wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
So if there are no more questions, I would like to ask for some final thoughts to both Kirsten and Jerod. And of course, everybody attending here has to be on January 13th. I have a phenomenal memory. I will look at you. So go to postclassical.com. Much easier than going to the Kennedy Center. Postclassical.com. And buy your tickets there. I think is there any more questions, David, there in writing?
Yeah, a question just got popped into the chat. It says, Jerod and Kirsten were introduced to music and performing arts by their respective parents. Is there today an environment in your native communities that helps to make music and arts available to children or the next generation?
I think Jerod can probably address this, being
Okay, sure.
on tribal lands much more than I can. I've always been part of the greater Muskogee diaspora because my family was not based with the tribe growing up. So I don't have the same information that Jerod probably would for that.
Okay. Yeah, sure. So I'm very privileged to be a part of a legacy of teaching composition to American Indian students. And I started out at the Grand Canyon Music Festival for the Native American Composer Apprentice Program there. And then I founded the Chickasaw Summer Arts Academy, I taught composition there for 12 years. I've taught composition to Native kids out. I've been back to Hopi Reservation a couple times for composition programs there, and also with Lummies, and also in Toronto and Minneapolis, the Minneapolis area. And then also I'm now about to be in my fourth summer teaching composition at the First Americans Museum in Oklahoma City. And all of those compositions, when we do that, I post all their pieces on all the socials, and so everybody can enjoy new compositions by primarily Native kids, but they're always a mix. They're usually a demographic representation of Indian country here in Oklahoma. And so there is a legacy going on like that. So there's lots. I hope I'm answering your question with that. I'm sorry, am I addressing your question well by telling you that?
Is there anything to say, Jerod? I think the question was specifically about children and making music and arts available to children in your communities.
Yes. Yeah. And so all of our tribes in Oklahoma, like all of them are growing programs, and many of them are artistically based. So there are summer academies, there's year-long academies, that kind of thing that different tribes are doing. So yeah, the answer is yes. Indian country is growing with many programs for our tribal youth that involve not just the arts, but I mean like civics and agriculture and sports and science and math and language, and there's language programs, like for tribal language revitalization. So not only is there just in music and the arts and dance and everything, it's in all kinds of fields. Our tribes are growing. I mean, it's a renaissance. It's truly a renaissance of what's going on with that. So the answer is resounding yes, and it's in many more areas than you can even imagine.
Fantastic.
I do think acknowledging the language aspect is really important too, because so many of our tribes had part of the goal with residential schools and things like that was to eradicate the language. The idea being if you took away the language, it would aid in assimilation into white culture. There is a huge push for people to learn their languages. My parents very much wanted to be able to give that to me, but we lived in Ohio. And there were no elders around that could help. Now, for perspective, my mother was not taught any Muskogee intentionally because her father was not taught Muskogee intentionally so that they could assimilate into white culture. The last person in my family who spoke any Muskogee was my great-grandmother. And so keeping all of that in mind, When the pandemic happened, all of a sudden, these language classes became available online.
Yes.
And that's how I started to learn. That's how I learned Muskogee Lullaby, which if you come to the concert, you will hear me sing with my 5-year-old who has heard it her entire life because she was born right before the pandemic. And I learned it right around that time so that these important things that I've always wanted to have be a part of my life suddenly could be. There are terrible, awful things that came with the pandemic, but one good thing was modes of communication like this. And that did help revitalize the language programs. Jerod's one of our translator for Loxi Shali, Shell Shaker, the opera that we just did, is one of the highest up people in the Chickasaw Nation revitalization of language program. And it's phenomenal listening and learning and seeing how all of these people are learning because we can't just sit with elders anymore. It's not an option that is given to us. If we're local, we can, but it's not like it used to be. And unfortunately, because of the pandemic, so many Native people were affected and entire groups of elders were wiped out. I know that affected the Muskogee Nation. The piece that I sang with Jerod Hojo, his piece, is exactly about that, about the Navajo Nation losing so many of their elders. So I think the language revitalization directly ties in to maintaining the heritage. In whatever way you want to describe that. It's about maintaining the heritage. I do also want to mention that places like Opera Montana are doing projects where they're taking Native people out into communities to teach what we do and show people on reservations in Montana that classical singing and classical music is an option, because if you don't have that in front of you as a child, you don't know. You can't know. So, and also programs like this, I hope people bring their children. I hope that if you're listening and you have children or grandchildren, that you'll bring them. That there is no better way to introduce people to what we do than to have something like this where they can see it live and get to have a talkback experience and things like that.
Kirsten and Jerod, I cannot thank you enough for being part of this program. It's going to be, I cannot wait. Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much. And thank you to all our audiences. So you see that PostClassical Ensemble really brings incredible things to the Kennedy Center and to our audiences. Thank you, Kirsten. Thank you, Jerod. And thank you all. And I see you very soon.
Mado.
That's great. Thanks, everyone.